Welcome to all of our ISM members and our guests joining us for today's program hosted by ISM New Jersey. Our speaker for today is Graham Crawshaw, who I adore, and he will be speaking on professional services category. It's a spotlight on that particular category. We will be running a few polls today, so please be sure to participate because we get a better pulse of the results from our audience. We really want you to participate in the three polls that we're going to be running. Also, we would like you, if you have any comments or questions for Graham, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll definitely get to them after the presentation. Now, on to our speaker for today. For those that are not familiar with Graham, he is the Procurement Content Director for CASME, and Graham is actually in the UK, so he's joining us a little bit later than we are today. Graham has the overall responsibility for the quality of CASME's Global Roundtable and Virtual Events program. I know he does a lot of speaking events as well. Prior to joining CASME, Graham spent 20 years working in procurement for the music industry within operational and marketing environment. At EMI, Graham regularly supported major artists, including the Beatles, Queen, and Pink Floyd, in developing and sourcing their unique packaging requirements, and subsequently worked on the company's first music streaming contract. Graham is also a fellow of SIPS, as we all heard earlier. He just went to their graduation, so congratulations to all of them. Graham is also a frequent speaker for ProcureCon if anybody is able to join when Graham is speaking. At this point now, I'd like to turn the program over to you, Graham.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kathy. And yeah, one of these days we will definitely meet. I really look forward to that. So, professional services. Let me bring you up to date with sort of what we see as good practice going on within professional services. You've heard about me. You don't need to see me or hear about anything more. We will share these slides. So I think that does make it easier. I'm going to talk quite quickly through them, not covering every point, but they're quite useful to reflect on afterwards. I hate the death by PowerPoint, but I think people that know me know that by now. Just to set the scene as to where this information has come from, because I've not made it up. This has all come from the 200 or so events that CASME puts on across the world throughout the year. And it's from those events that are attended by category managers, we're able to get a real good understanding what is going on in the category. We then document and summarize all of those discussions and also conduct some additional benchmarking just to really validate everything and make sure that all the things stack up and make sense. If you're not familiar with CASME, then we're made up of around 250 companies globally. Most are large global organizations. So it's these companies and just a small number of logos where we're allowed to use them are on the screen. But it's to give you that understanding that it's come from companies that are very well recognized and respected within the procurement community. Typically, you've got teams of people in different parts of the world because we're very much global as well. But my last slide about CASME is my favorite, and that's that reassurance that I'm giving you. We do not have any sponsors, suppliers, or consultants impacting anything that we do. Everything comes from procurement. So all the points I'm going to share with you now, you just know has come from probably thousands, at least 1,000 category managers who look after and support professional services in companies literally right across the world. And actually, the difference between whether you're based in Asia, Europe, or US, there's not a great deal of difference. The principles all remain very much the same. So what I'm going to cover is strategic considerations, the very important topic of stakeholder engagement, which I know we struggle with, look at some cost models, look at contracts and risk, performance measurement, trends and technology. And I'm going to make sure we can wrap all of that up and time for Q&A. and 3 polls in the next 50 minutes. That is the plan. Let's get straight into the details. And if you bear with us for that 50 minutes, this is what we're going to cover. This is the learning objectives, and you're going to hear how professional services is changing, some of the cost models, as I've said, and see some of the trends, which hopefully you'll be able to relate to and at least experience. Okay, let's get into some of the detail. And just to remind anyone that's joining late, we're recording and also share the slides with you. The business requirements vary on professional services. It's one of those categories that for some companies, it embraces a lot of activity. At its general highest level, I think we're talking about those professional services, those consultancy organizations, often the largest, you know, the big four, the big six, those that are really engaged by the business. But in addition, there could be some niche players also considered just to help mix things up for organizations. So big companies, niche companies, also within professional services, we include legal services. I said some companies add other things into it as well, but it can end up getting too complex. So I thought, well, we'll start with that definition. Typically, the management consultancies, the companies that are supporting with your IT systems, there it's more complex because they may be selling consultancy alongside a tool or a piece of software. We're all going through transformation, whether it's procurement or any other function. So a lot of professional services is required for that. And that has really ramped up over the last probably 5 years. It's one of those, since the pandemic, those demands have gone up significantly. Of course, all companies have got that less exciting work, if you like, around taxation and accountancy and audit. That also is very much within professional services scope. More recently, we've seen companies struggle and want to do more in terms of ESG. And the feeling there is that because it is specialist, because there isn't that necessarily internal talent, then again, professional organizations brought in to implement, oversee systems, and generally guide and support that particular sort of area. The last one is that labor and augmented staffing requirements. To be honest, I would say that's further down the list. I think for most companies, whether it's temporary or contingent or staff augmentation, that tends to really be in a category of its own rather than also be caught up with professional services. But there's always exceptions. And that's why I thought if we don't include it on the chart, someone's going to say, oh, what about this one? So the scope is broad. The expenditure in this area is also significant for many organizations. And I think one of the reasons for that is the actual requirements are going right across business functions. If you think so many categories that we work on, you know which business function you're supporting. So if it's marketing contracts, marketing services, then obviously it is marketing. But the difference with professional services is it's almost everyone's got a requirement and everyone's got their own needs and particular interests in specific companies, which actually makes that also a different dynamic. As the more senior the individuals within the businesses, the more senior they become, the more demanding, the more challenging it is to actually meet their requirements and get sort of good procurement processes in place for what they're actually looking to acquire. This is one of those categories, almost like marketing, that people will use the back door, try and circumvent what procurement has got set up. So that leaves a lot of challenges. I want to do our first poll because I think I've spoken about the scope, and with any presentation, I want to make sure we understand the scope of what we're talking about so that we're all on the same page. But I want to get from you what your scope of involvement and work is. So let us run. Oh, thank you, Kathy. Thanks for helping out there. Which business requirements are you using professional services? And you can tick all those that apply. The options we have got are quite a few. So I'll run through very quickly, giving you time to consider consultancy for IT, digital transformation, the accountancy, taxation, regulatory compliance, strategic project management, infrastructure and organization structure, augmentation. Let's see if anyone does include that within this scope. ESG support, consultancy around M&A, very interesting one. Suggestions for alternative approaches to HR, marketing and sales, training and development programs, supply chain management, or other. If you select other, then by all means put that in the chat and we can pick that one up. Those are the main areas that our experienced professional service contracts are really required. So let's just get a view from you as to how you sort of respond to that. Just see if anyone else can wants to put in a response. I can see people. I like to get at least sort of 50% of people to respond, just to make it sure it's more meaningful. But equally, I know sometimes technology and using Zoom limits what people can use. I'm going to give it literally 2 or 3 more seconds, and then we'll move on, and I'll share those results. Okay, let's end the poll. I could do that, and let's share the results. A mix. So I'm not really surprised by that. I think it just shows you, and because you could tick more than one, don't worry about the percentages. Look at the line, the length of the line, the blue line. And that gives you a bit of feel for the most sort of popular areas. So I guess we're looking at that IT, digital transformation, strategic project management. Interesting, the augmentation is also quite a lengthy line on this one. But they've all got some response. So it just shows you the complexity and the breadth that we're looking at there. I did want to share, we've run this poll throughout the CASME members, and I thought, well, let's just show you what CASME members in general, and again, give that global perspective as well. And in fact, very similar. Look at that. In fact, incredibly similar, which actually just shows what a small world it is in procurement. I often find if we do a live poll and then compare it with one we did over the last probably 3 months, it is very similar. So that helps position and structure the emphasis as to where you're going to do the contract. So that's good. We're on the same wavelength. What I wanted to share with you is what delegates, category managers have shared with us as to a number of areas. So first of all, what's procurement's role? What really have we got responsibility to support? And I'm going to just quickly sort of run through this because I think it's important to build a picture as to what our scope of support is. So yeah, naturally developing that overall strategy, developing the RFX process, which is good, promoting collaboration. We'll talk about stakeholders in a while, but I've already indicated this is a really tough one to actually get certain stakeholders on board. So a massive challenge there. Preparing the contract with the service providers, getting consistency to ensure that almost the entire business is using the contracts you've put in place. So having identified the range of different types of professional services, the fact it's being used right across the different business functions, you know as well as I, those business functions don't talk to each other. Procurement is in the perfect position to be able to almost moderate or collaborate with all of that community in your organization to say, look, we've already got a professional services organization that's helping HR or is helping marketing or is helping business A versus business B. And let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not have even more suppliers brought in. I know this is one of those categories that if you're not careful, you end up with massive list of approved suppliers supporting professional services. Getting that down, getting that supplier base reduced is another activity that procurement get involved with. And then number 6 here, supplier relationship management. Some of these suppliers you'll be spending a lot of money with, and you want it that the supplier also has that real good understanding and trust and respect for working with procurement. You don't want it just that stakeholder that it means that procurement is either missed out or just not kept in the loop. We say for many times we want to get involved with those projects early, and I think this is one category where it can be really difficult. You don't want to just leave things to the last minute, so actually getting involved, having those relationships with potential suppliers is definitely an aspect I see happening an awful lot. The strategic considerations continue, what procurement is doing. Linked with that sort of managing the supply base, then of course you've got a lot of information. You know what the spend is with all of these companies, whereas the business won't. They're operating in a silo. We've already identified that. So to say, well, this company we're spending X tens of millions of dollars with, then that's going to have a bit of an influence on some of the other aspects of the business. Ideally, having a process so that when a company, a consultancy is required, you've got a very efficient process to actually get them onboarded, established, especially if they're an approved supplier already, but get that engagement working to make that easier. Then doing post-project reviews. I think professional services is one of those areas, if the work goes well, there's lots of celebration, everyone's very pleased with it. You don't always hear when things don't perhaps go to plan, but there's a lot of sharing that can be done to make it clear if a supplier is doing something particularly well or particularly poorly, that is understood by the whole organization. Championing transformation and change management is another role. I can see why we're way down the list on that. Don't necessarily see that as higher priority as some of the other areas. And then the last one, this getting recognition of strategic value. That can be a hard slog. Personally, having looked at these, I think there are better roles higher up that list where you really can get involved, get established, and deliver the value. The debate in terms of the large consultancy versus the niche provider. It's a difficult one. The niche providers may have more specialist knowledge. Generally, they're much cheaper. Generally, it is an organization that's been established from senior partners that have left the larger, bigger organizations. The other balancing factor is there are times a company just wants to play it incredibly safe, wants to stick with the well-known company and doesn't want to make any risks. I think the view across procurement is being aware of the decision process that you're wanting your stakeholders to make. It's not really for you to say, no, you've got to use the niche supplier or you've got to use the larger big four supplier consultancy. But I think actually having those conversations, making people aware there are alternatives which may be more beneficial. You've also got those very specialist areas, and we identify too, this cybersecurity, data privacy, those areas that are very niche and new. It may be better to go straight to that niche provider rather than the big four. We've heard many times that in theory, the big four can do anything. But in practice, they are then needing to bring in these specialists. So it's debatable whether that really is the right way or not. Now, if you're really controversial, you could promote the idea that actually internal consultancy, internal resource may be a better option. I think my view on that would be that only works if there's an appetite or really the company is interested in doing that. I don't think procurement should necessarily be leading on that particular decision. Presenting the options, educating, balancing the pros and cons of all types, I think that is the area that we can not only do very well, but deliver a lot of value. So governance, we talk so much about governance, that G in ESG. And I think it's an area in professional services that is so important. And I think here you're going to need your senior leadership to get this embedded, get the policies in place to actually enable you to then have this governance in place. And when we had this conversation, you can see some of the ideas that have been put forward. Ideally, you have that spend threshold that then determines that you've got to involve procurement. However, and there's always two sides to everything, we know that consultancy is one of those areas subject to massive scope creep. And the challenge is, once you've started with a particular service provider, it may be very difficult to change. So I think in addition to understanding this threshold of spend, it's a question of, well, actually, what is that project likely to look like? Is it going to balloon? Is it going to double in cost? And therefore, if so, do you need a stricter, more tighter governance to be in place? Do you want a panel of suppliers and put the energy into getting that approved panel and then having senior leadership almost sort of say, look, these are the supplies that must be used unless there really is a very good reason, and anyone that's not using the suppliers that are approved basically gets on that list. And then it becomes back down to your company's culture as to whether anyone cares that their name has been put on the list. I wouldn't like to prejudge. There are some companies that you would not want stakeholders to appear on that list because it's going to have consequences. Other companies, the culture is such that yes, it's not going to be the clout. It's not going to carry the weight that you would expect or hope that it would. So it's about applying governance to what works for your organization and the culture that your organization operates in. Stakeholder engagement. You know what? This is one of my favorite topics. We have been talking about this for years. Procurement's made some good progress, but there's still a lot more to go. And as I hinted, this is one of those categories that I think, my goodness, trying to get the most senior individuals in the organization to comply can be really tough. And let's face it, suppliers, professional services, service providers really know and almost structure themselves how to manipulate a situation. So they'll have individuals at all different levels, dovetailing into the same levels within your organization. It can be such a nightmare. So back to governance. Are you able to insist on a strict evaluation process and supplier selection process, or is that just not going to work within your organization? How much can you actually get involved? Is it all about the relationships? Do you need to let projects go by you, and only when you're asked to do some firefighting or some contractual stuff say, look, I'll help you out now, but next time, please let me get involved much earlier in the process. I'm not going to talk about stakeholder segmentation, but I think it's really clear. Well, in fact, I'll briefly mention it. You divide your stakeholders into perhaps gold, silver, bronze, and spend all the focus attention primarily on those gold ones in terms of meetings and engagement. And then as you change from silver to bronze, the interactions are significantly less. But I think here it's down to a combination of what money is being spent, the seniority, the status of that stakeholder, the relationship you've got with them, that really is going to determine how much challenge it will be for procurement. There is no easy answer to this. The message is you've got to get in there. You've got to have those conversations, talk to them. We half joke about the water cooler, but it's so true. The examples that we hear that just almost by accident, putting out fires, helping out, that seems to be the way that stakeholder engagement at least initially kicks off. I always sound my warning around the putting out fires. You don't want to be known as the individual that only puts out fires and does nothing else, or is restricted to just small value projects because the stakeholders perceive that's what you do. So use the firefighting, use the smaller projects as a stepping stone, a means to an end to get involved with larger projects. Again, so much of this is down to culture. Now, I know I've said that a few times, but actually, if all companies were the same and we had one standard procurement process, life would be boring and it would probably be automated by now. I should always say stakeholder engagement is that one area that AI is not going to take over. It's those that are really effective in procurement are those that really can master this stakeholder engagement sort of process. It is all about the collaboration, the working with them, perhaps producing some tools to actually help. So whether it is a guided buying structure that means that there can be some self-help, more companies are getting chatbots to actually help with that guided buying process. So implementing some sort of self-help tools to really get to that element that's commoditized. Of course, back to the start of the process here, depending what you're talking about is going to determine how much it can be commoditized or whether you're talking individual RFX processes each time professional services is required. Some more ideas here. Don't want to miss anything out, and you can look at any detail that I do miss when we send you the slides. But influencing the stakeholders, I think often that has got to be down to what works for your organization. I've covered the basics. I've covered the general approach to being able to influence. There's always going to be exceptions, why it does work, why it doesn't work. But I think what we're seeing in category management is individuals that are now highly skilled at maintaining all of these relationships, the relationships with the suppliers, the relationships with the business. Those are the ones, and probably you want your best category managers really engaged on the high spend aspect of professional services. That really is going to make a difference. Right, I'm going to move some of through those because I've covered that. And again, it depends on your organization. If doing quarterly business reviews with those suppliers, bringing in your stakeholders to that meeting, it doesn't always work. It doesn't work for quite a number of companies. Other companies, it is the way to get the stakeholders on board. So there are different approaches depending on the way that you typically run all of your stakeholder engagement. Ideally, you will be having the review meetings. Stakeholders will be involved at a more strategic level. So not individual project by project, but at a level that does mean that perhaps the stakeholders are then subjected to seeing what the supplier could actually do, rather than starting from the basis of the business wants a statement of work written. Who are we going to get to do this work? Getting that contribution, getting those statements of work written with procurement, with the stakeholder, and do that first before engaging the supplier. How many times have we seen the situation where actually the business comes to you with a statement of work for you to realize it's been written by the supplier that they want to do that work. And then you read that statement of work and suddenly realize it's positioned in a way that actually no one else is going to be able to compete. Or even worse, another supplier will recognize who has done that work and who is therefore more likely to be successful. And we all know if you've got a panel of suppliers and one or two never get anything because statements of work have been written so they're excluded, that's going to just result in a lot of frustration. So I think this, of all categories, is very much a balancing act between all of the different ways of working. Let me have a cup of my coffee here whilst we do the second poll. In fact, I can launch poll 2. There we go. We've spoken about having the panel of suppliers. Which five criteria are key for evaluating and selecting these professional services providers? And we've got a whole list, which I'm about to read out. Now I've had a drink. Is it down to their capacity, capability, and quality? Is it down to their licensing? And perhaps where IT is heavily involved, that is a massive issue. Geographic coverage, presence in specific locations, effective use of technology and digital applications to support project delivery, compatibility with your culture and alignment with its values. That's one of my favorite ones there. Self-delivery versus subcontractors may be controversial depending on your approach. Financial stability of the organization, especially if you're going to more of those niche providers that I spoke of. Compliance with ESG, sustainability, DE&I requirements, a trend that is growing and is expected from all suppliers. So let's include professional services as well. Some would argue that that's a hard one, but I'm not sure that it is. I think because of the spend, it's definitely worth making sure there's alignment there with your ESG requirements. And then risk management strategy, including third-party risk management, and then brand recognition. That time where you really do select the supplier because of the name, perhaps their proven history, or just because it's the safe option to do. If there's anything else that you think I've missed, please put that in the chat. So interesting, you can answer multiple choice here. So once again, it's going to be a collection. Just going to store for a few more seconds just to see if there are any more responses. I think we're probably going to get as many as we can. So once again, look at the length of the bar, not the percentages, because you've been able to answer more than one. So licenses, that would give me an indication there's a big influence on IT here. Then capabilities, sort of capacity. And then a bit of a jump down, really. Geographic presence, well, I think that does depend on what your requirements are. I think the compatibility with the culture also is important. Interesting, that self-delivery. That was a hot thing, quite a few, probably pre-pandemic. Interesting to see that that's less of an interest, and then some interest in terms of risk management. I'm almost quite pleased that the brand recognition isn't so much of a concern, because that doesn't help procurement. That makes it a hard job for us. So let me share with you the same results when we went out to the CASME members. And I said, I can't exactly remember when we did this, but it's within the last 3 or 4 months. So it's very, very recent. And again, nice, reassuring that we've got the same sort of answers within parameters of statistical change, I guess. Capabilities, capacity, quality, right at the top, followed by the licenses, and then followed by the geographic presence. So that's really interesting to see that that real focus on those same. So whether it's this group or whether it's a much broader global group of category managers, the criteria for selecting is very similar. So again, hope that can be of use if you're looking to review your own internal checklists on that area. Cost models. I'm not going to go into details because I think it's really more about awareness of cost models. And I'm sure you probably do know this, but it's always useful just to get that perspective from category managers as to what they're really seeing as the way forward. And I think we like the idea of not having the risk within our company. But I think we know there's a trade-off there. So what sounds really good in terms of a fixed project cost, in practice, if you're down and responsible for some of the scope and delivering your side of the bargain, you can come unstuck. So what we're looking at, rate cards, of course, fixed fee, if the statement of work is not likely to creep and is very clearly and well defined, which often it's not. Even if you think it is at the beginning, something changes and it's not. Time and materials is still by far the most popular, not because it's liked, but just from a position of necessity. Project-based and then discounts based on spend. That's the catch-all. And for companies that have got the panel of suppliers in place, then that's a really good one. Just in case something happens, there's merger acquisition activity that you weren't aware of. That means that you're not going to lose out on negotiation possibility because you've got that discount. If you achieve the threshold, then that's what you were likely to be successful in gaining. Other models now starting to be less popular, but nevertheless wanted to share with you. Retained based pricing. It depends, maybe okay for your auditors, but less likely to be preferred by the business. Guaranteed maximum price, again, down to the scope definition, but at least it's an alternative. Value and performance based. I'm seeing more of that in marketing contracts. So where it's very clear whether the delivery has achieved the objective or not. So has the advert achieved that reach? Has the social media achieved the hits, the response, the call to actions that you've been asking for and have defined? So that's definitely happening, but there's a link there with digitalization and the ability to be very clear. Has what you are remunerating been achieved? Yes or no? Very, very clear cut. Bonus structure, again, that's a struggle. Sounds good, but in practice, who's paying the bonus? Where's that budget come from? So that's almost down to procurement. If you're going to negotiate that, you've got to also negotiate, probably with finance and the business, how you're going to succeed in paying any additional bonus or remuneration that's due because targets have been achieved. So it's one of those that sounds good, but there can often be a bit of an internal fight around that. And then finally, gain share. And we see that in a lot of facilities management contracts where it does require change management from the supplier and also from procurement. So that definitely is an option. Again, it's all around the definition to make sure that that's clear cut. Procurement's delivering more value by focusing on risk, and there's no reason why this should be eliminated or not included in the whole professional services contracts. So the areas that we're saying should be addressed definitely include all of those around cybersecurity, data privacy, intellectual property, a fascinating one, anyone that's involved with AI, and good luck in negotiating some of the indemnity around IP coming up from that. So having seen licenses are included in so many of your contracts, that is the current nightmare, and probably a subject for another session, dealing with indemnity and IP, making sure that anything that you're using in terms of artificial intelligence is not going to result in a lawsuit. And in fairness, that's more of an issue in North America than probably anywhere else in the world at the moment. But I think that that could change, and as other countries that focus on litigation get sort of nervous and challenged by that situation. So definitely knowledge transfer. That's also a good clause to make sure that you really have got that well defined. Let's ensure that anything that is gained from the whole consultancy exercise is provided back to you. You've paid for it, so make sure that that is in the clause. I'm less convinced around the termination for convenience. It's a blunt clause. Only large organizations, probably working with niche suppliers, have any hope of negotiating that clause. I think it's a poor one of the large company putting pressure on the supplier. The big four, the large consultancies, they're not going to accept that. Correct me if anyone believes that they've done differently. But equally, business priorities change. Consultancy work that was started, there may be some reason why it dramatically changes. So I like the idea, but let's not have such a blunt clause that it just causes a whole load of redlining issues. In terms of monitoring, we asked our members, what are you doing in terms of managing the performance of service providers? These could then result in some KPIs. I'm not sure they're in sequence, so just have a look at these. But yeah, definitely clauses, performance around the statement of work, trying to avoid scope creep, obviously avoid increasing costs, making sure that everything is transferred over to the business, that IP is also protected and confidentiality understood. So yes, definitely some KPIs around this. Key people, key individual, again, depending on who you're negotiating with, that may be easier said than done, whether you can actually get that agreement. You may get the A team, can you keep the A team, for example, but you've also then got issues around sort of status of employment. Apologies, I don't know I can't remember the precise legislation in the US, but it's the equivalent of IR35 in Europe, where there's issues is that individual actually an employee, or do they remain a contractor? So a whole range of different ways of actually monitoring performance. And if you remember at the start, I said, this is the value procurement can deliver back to the business and stakeholder and say, look, this is what we've captured. This is how we see the contract working. Of course, we all know price is just one aspect of the contract. And during our discussions with professional services contract category managers, we said, where are you best negotiating if you want some added value that you don't want to pay for? So, it's that whole thing. What's the value to you versus the value for the supplier to provide? And we've got a bit of a good list here. So, for example, additional related consultancy, service subscriptions, get those extended, workshops, additional training, provision of a help desk, software upgrades, good luck with that one, or some short-term sort of waivers. I know it can be a big debate that when you've just invested in a system, at what point does the licensing and the support for that actually start? Is it on implementation or is it on contract signing? So there's definitely negotiation around that. And depending on the supplier, there's going to be a pushback or a willingness to say, yeah, we'll compromise in that in that area. Yeah, that's the one I've just sort of covered. Extended maintenance, market intelligence. So a great long list there of what we're saying really is your go-to checklist when you've agreed the price, but you want some more value incorporated into the contract. Our last poll, and I'm mindful, it's amazing how the time goes today. What are the top 3 opportunities for procurement to add value beyond cost to this particular category? And we've got some options here that we've sort of tested out. Is it about simplifying and standardizing the processes to make it easier for the business? Is it about the educating stakeholders regarding risk management, knowledge transfer, creating that centralized knowledge repository, establishing the preferred supplier lists, which probably makes it easier and quicker to engage a relevant supplier? Is it about evaluating and monitoring suppliers? Is it about developing a consistent approach for consultancy across your business? Is it that market research and information that you can bring to your stakeholder? Is it about the collaboration work you could do to develop the statement of work? Or is it around spend data and giving the analytics to the stakeholders as to where they're actually spending the money? So let's just give you a few seconds to digest. That's quite a list. We only want the top 3. Making you work on the last poll, because to be honest, it'd be easy. You could tick all the options there. That wouldn't be so helpful. But I think in terms of the value, don't underestimate what value procurement can deliver to this category. It's a hard one. It may be difficult to begin with the senior executives, but you've got to persevere. And our experience is once you get in there, demonstrate some of these values, then you will be invited to continue. In the interest of time, let's end the poll and share the results with you. So simplifying and standardizing the process, make it easier for the stakeholder, educating around risk, and then collaborating to work with statement of work. So those are the 3 longest ones. Again, ignore the percentage because you've responded to more than one. Let me then stop that sharing and share. Oh, I thought we'd done that one ourselves. Apologies, I don't have anything data to cross-reference on that one. It must have been a new poll I added in just for this presentation. Finally, trends and technology. No surprise in some of these, but we asked our members, look, what is the trend for this category? What should we be looking at? Of course, digitalization, more systems and tools to actually help. Of course, AI, that's going to be an asset, but also a threat. You certainly don't want your service providers just using AI to deliver all the results back to you. That's an area that I know a number of companies are contractually ensuring does not happen because you're paying them for their creative input. You don't just expect something to be generated on AI. The ESG, because of the spend in this category, it's not going to go away. There is going to be more involvement, either in terms of the consultancy or just checking off that the suppliers themselves are adhering to what your company is expecting in terms of ESG. I think there is going to be more subcontracting going on. That seems to be loud and clear because there's such a demand, and some of the areas for negotiation are becoming so niche that the talent pool is really a challenge to get the right people to support. So I think that whole labor aspect of getting the right people, getting away from the shortage, means that maybe you're either going direct to niche or accepting that the larger consultancies themselves will be using subcontractors and then use of freelancers as well. So again, some opportunities there. That has been, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm sure Kathy will now join me. That's been a whistle-stop tour summarizing what CASME members have seen over the last few months as to how they are managing professional services. I reiterate, we've not made it up. We've not created that. That has come from probably around 1,000 category managers. If your assessment of doing professional services in your organization resonates with most of what I've shared, then clearly you're doing very well. If there's some things, hopefully from those checklists, you can take away and see if there's an aspect of it that you can then perhaps work on and then deliver more value to the business. I hope that has been of interest. No questions at the moment, Kathy.
No questions at all.
Not sure why. I can't believe I've answered all the questions. I don't always have all the answers, but the questions often are quite interesting to see. So if anyone does want to ask anything about professional services, then sort of test us out and see what we know. But yeah. So I hope that was of interest, Kathy. Are
Oh,
you
definitely. Well, let me ask you, what is
yes,
your opinion on what you think the future trends are going to be in 5 or 10 years?
on professional services?
Hmm.
I think that it's going to be a category that continues to grow. More companies are sticking to what they do well and wanting to outsource everything. And as we face new challenges, it will then just become easier or a more important requirement to bring in the right talent. We know the story of talent. Getting the right people, getting the skill set is a nightmare. So maybe it is saying we're just going to bring that in. Now, whether it's through the big consultancies, I'm not sure. I wouldn't like to have my crystal ball saying the answer to that. However, the growth of niche consultants, if that continues like it has,
Hmm.
and let's face it, you get almost the same skill level, and it's not the same high fees that the larger companies demand. So if you're going to use more of it, you want to be more cost effective. And if you're bringing in more skills, then again, you're going to want to really have access to the right talent. So I think it's a category that definitely is going to grow. And it's a tough one for procurement. There's no question of it. I didn't really focus too much on legal. The reason for that is the principles are almost the same. Procurement is less mature when it comes to legal. It's even harder to negotiate with law firms. You can do some commoditization of some of the really basic transactions, but the bulk of the spend when it comes to legal, it's a battle. And I think there are bigger fish to fry. Is that understood? As a
Yes,
yeah, oh good.
you
I
got it.
you got it good. A bit of interpretation from English to American here. I'm used to so I think yeah, lots of definitely exciting things going on. But yeah, definitely if you're not managing it well, just or you think you aren't because the stakeholders won't let you, I think that's really the point to start on. Get that
Hmm.
stakeholder engagement working and just get some progress there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I see no questions in the
I
chat.
know, I'm sorry. If
We
anyone ever does want to ask questions, then connect with me on LinkedIn. My email address is there, and it'll be on the presentation. Always willing to answer any specific questions that people have. Everyone's just gone too shy. Maybe it's just that time after lunch that they can't think of any questions. But I hope that the absence of questions doesn't mean that it hasn't been of value. So I really hope that that has given you something to think about. That's always the objective of these presentations, not to give you the answer. If it was that straightforward, it would be done by a computer by now. Instead, it's presenting you with all the options, good practice from procurement, and letting you work out what works for your organization.
Oh, there you
Thank you,
go.
Kathy. We've got I can't remember the date, but we've got a session on AI, haven't we, in the fall?
We do. We're going to be
Yes.
do one in November on AI. I'm not sure if it might be in development stages right now.
So and we've got another one that we set up two, didn't we, for the fall? And my brain is like a sieve, but I'm really looking
We
forward to being
did.
back in the fall. Really looking forward to sharing on AI, a very controversial topic. So yeah, by November we'll have even more data. So look
Mhm.
forward to seeing everyone then. But yeah, thanks for the invite, Kathy. Great to be
Oh, thank
talking.
you. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you, Graham, as always. And have a great rest of the week. It's Thursday, so
One more
we only
day
have
to
one
go.
more day to go till the
And
weekend.
I'm done for Thursday as well. So time for a glass of wine, I think. So
Gotcha,
yeah,
gotcha. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we'll have this recording published soon, very shortly.
great. Thank you. Bye then. Bye for
Okay,
now.
bye-bye, everybody.